Bulls Day here on Old Man Squad Fantasy Basketball. Hi, everybody. Good Monday to you all. Start of another week where we are, I think, pretty officially now into the 5 shows a week thing. And if leagues open, it'll go up again. I'm just waiting, man. I'm sitting and I'm waiting, anticipating. Anyway, Chicago 39-43 last year. This is a team that had a lot of stuff go better than expected. Vooch being pretty much unbelievable for like the first 4 months of this season at the top of the board. His effective field goal percent was out of this world. Josh Giddey and Coby White were both very good down the stretch last year. They sort of cleared things out by moving Zach LaVine. It didn't make them better necessarily, but it was sort of, addition by subtraction kind of thing in that it allowed other players to show their wares to some degree. Our buddies over at FanDuel Sports and FanDuel Sportsbook. Hell yeah, party people. Pleasure to have them around, as per always. Have the Bulls regular season win total at 31.5. That is extraordinarily low. And money, at least at FanDuel right now, is coming in a little bit heavier on the under. Which I got to say, as I was going through these, and even saying it out loud still surprises me a little bit. I don't think the Bulls got worse year over year. Certainly not by 8 wins. I mean, they were 39-43 last season. I got to say it out loud to say, okay, that's 7.5 wins lower than last year's number. And I get it. Zach LaVine's gone. He's gone. But by all accounts, the Bulls this season are the same team that was fine down the stretch last year. This is a team that refuses adamantly, in the face of overwhelming evidence, they refuse to tank. So you can't do the, remove X number of wins due to tanking game with the Bulls because they're just not going to do it. And they've got all these young guys, a couple of them that they would have to extend, but they're sort of like on a team that's not going to tank, then you have to just assume that whatever young guys they have, they're just going to build around whatever timeline that is. And so, and we'll get to Buzelis in a minute. He's kind of the young guy. And then they've got the mostly young guys like Josh Giddey and Coby White, who they're going to have to extend. And then they've got the old goat in Vooch, who's now on an expiring deal. So by all accounts, this is probably the year you finally see Vooch get moved. And actually, you know what? Screw it. Let's just pivot right into Vooch. Where'd my Vooch tab go? Where are you, Vooch tab? There it is. It got pushed to the end somehow. So here's Vooch from last year. 18.5 points, 10 rebounds, 3.5 assists. He's coming off a career year, which seems nuts. He's been extremely durable during his time in Chicago, missing just 9 games, 0 games, 6 games, and 9 games again. 53% shooting was extraordinary. He shot 40% from 3, also extraordinary. Like, by all accounts, last year was as good as it could possibly get. So that's probably not going to happen again. And then for years, we've assumed the Bulls are going to just take pennies for him and move on. But now we're sort of at the year where they have to take pennies from him or move on, meaning, if this is a team, as we mentioned, that's not really tanking, but they did get rid of Zach LaVine. So I don't want you guys to look at them and say, oh, well, they're never going to trade an old guy because they're not tanking. They traded LaVine because they knew they had to do something or these guys are going to walk. And that'll be the same thing with Vooch again. So they'll try to get something back. Last year, what the hell did they get back for Zach LaVine? It was like Kevin Huerter and some picks for the most part. And they'll look for something, I'm sure, similar with Vooch, where it's like, okay, get back an NBA level player, but maybe not quite as good as the player you're sending out, and then draft assets of some kind. So from an over-under standpoint, I know we're talking about Vooch going into this year. I got to lean towards the over on this team because I just don't think they're going to throw in the towel. It's just not in the Bulls' nature. And at some point, we'll talk to we have a cavalcade. Am I using that word right? Of Bulls fans Bulls. Call them fans is probably doing these folks a disservice. And by the way, that is a cavalcade is like a parade. We have a parade of Bulls people in the fantasy basketball space, and we'll walk them through the show, and they'll all probably say the same thing, which is that, like, if this team didn't tank before, why the hell would they tank now? From a fantasy standpoint, that makes Vooch kind of a terrifying ad, even though he'll probably go later than he should. From the head-to-head side, you've got to assume he's rolling as like a timeshare type of big after the All-Star break. Any team that trades for Vooch is not going to be giving up all that much, not at this stage of his career because he don't really defend anymore. He'll help somebody, but if there's a contender out there that's like, yes, Vooch needs to be our savior, the team isn't actually a contender. And I'm sure you'll find one. There'll be plenty of teams that are looking for a big man around the trade deadline. If the Celtics are decent, they'd make sense because they've sort of punted on all big men in what's kind of a punt year for them. The Pacers are a little bit in like do we have a center kind of mode? I guess no, not really so much that team. I guess could he go back to the Magic? I guess. They got a bunch of centers, but none of them that they fully trust. So there are places where I guess Vooch could have a decent size role, but man, that is a tough sell. He'll probably get drafted a little bit earlier this coming year than he got last season because he was falling down towards 60, which was a pretty easy spot to take him as a Jared Allen corridor kind of guy. If he gets pushed up towards the earlier parts of that 35 to 65 range, I think I would just pass him over. But if he falls back into the 60s in a games cap format, sure, have at it. Like if he turns into a pumpkin in mid-February, then whatever, you got your 4 months out of him and then you move on. That's also fine. So that's my Vooch take. Josh Giddey, who probably should have been the first player that we started with on today's episode of Old Man Squad Fantasy Basketball, is coming off an incredible stretch run. Now, his overall numbers look pretty good. He was at 15, 8, and 7. I like the rebounds and the assists. Obviously, those numbers are excellent. 1.2 steals, 0.6 blocks, 1.5 threes, 47, 78 were the splits on 3 turnovers. But if you are only instead looking at the sort of after Zach LaVine part of the proceedings, Josh Giddey was number 5. Yes, top 5 in 9 category leagues on averages of 21, 11, and 9 with 1.5 steals, 0.8 blocks, 2 3-pointers, 50% from the field, 81% at the free throw line. I don't mean to alarm you guys, but you know whose numbers those sound like, right? Those are Luka Doncic kind of numbers or Nikola Jokic numbers without the scoring, with some scoring. Luka and Jokic were both at 29 points. That's a pretty good gap there. Giddey at 21. But Jokic on the season last year was his rebounding. 12.7. Holy crap, that was high. Luka was at 8. Down the stretch, Luka's rebounds were at 8.3. Giddey beat him there. Assists, Jokic was 10. Giddey was 9. Luka was 8. Steals, Jokic 1.8. Luka 1.7. Giddey 1.5. Now look, I go through all these things. I'm not here to tell you that Josh Giddey is the next Jokic and Luka Doncic. Far from it. But that is what he did down the stretch last year for 20 ball games. It was a small-ish sample size, but it wasn't 0. The sample size was alive. Most importantly, over that stretch, he took 14 and a half shots, 9 assists, 6 free throws a game. The usage was big time, reminiscent a little bit of his second year in Oklahoma City when he was squeezing up against the edge of the top 100 for parts of the year and then beat it for other parts. But obviously, with the big bump in field goal percent down the stretch, he hit his three-pointers at a better clip. His free throws were up into the 80s instead of the low 70s back then, and assists being at 9 instead of 6, what they were that second year in OKC. That's a very large gap to cover as well. Still, when you look at those games, if you just look at the game log, the Bulls were mostly healthy while he was doing that. Here, we can just pull up this game against the Lakers from March 27th when he put up a big old chunker of a line. Josh Giddey, 25, 14, and 11 with 2 steals. You know who else played in that game? Basically every other usage guy. Lonzo Ball and Ayo Dosunmu were the biggest impact players that were out for that particular ball game. But Vooch was in, Coby White was in, Buzelis was in, Herter was in. In fact, here, let's look at the box score. I'll put it on your screen for you guys. Look what these guys did. Herter got 17 shots, Buzelis got 10, Vooch got 10, Giddey 19, White 20. The Bulls played fast, and that led to colossal offensive numbers. They also didn't much use the bench for this particular ball game. Patrick Williams played 29 minutes off the bench, and basically nobody else saw any playing time. So that helped. Josh Giddey playing 40 minutes. Was this the one that they won on that crazy heave? Yeah, I think it might have been. Yeah, that was the Giddey half quarter to win. That was a crazy ball game. Not important. Where did my Giddey tab go? Let's get back to Josh. There's Josh. So it does beg the question, how early are you drafting Josh Giddey this year? The answer should be relatively early. He's one of those ones where I don't have a clue, not a clue, what his pre-rank is going to be. Because his overall rank last year was number 58, which is fine, but not, eye-popping type of rank like the end of season top 5. So does he get drafted near 58, what his overall season marker was? Or does he get pushed up the board? Because, if I got to get Josh Giddey in the 3rd round, I don't think I can do it. When you think about the guys that are likely to go in the 3rd round, that's a big risk play. But man, he was good down the stretch last year. I'll tell you what, I am more than willing to grab Josh Giddey in the top 50, which, not exactly going out on a limb. I know pretty much everybody would be, but it's possible that that's where he opens up because of the full season mark, because of the Zach LaVine was still here mark, and Vooch was taking 14 shots instead of, what was the Vooch shot number down the stretch last year? Down the stretch, final month of the year, he's still at 13.5. Yeah, I mean, Vooch's his usage rate went down a little bit, but not a ton. A lot of this was just you replaced Zach LaVine with Kevin Herter. So, 17, 18 shots or whatever it was became a dozen. Someone's going to have to take those other 5 or 6 shots a game. Maybe more importantly, you replaced a primary ball handler with a non-primary ball handler. So forget just the shots per game. Think about it from a just who's got the ball in their hand. So it mostly went to Josh Giddey and Coby White after that. And it's why Coby White, by the way, we're talking about Josh Giddey. How high am I willing to go on him? I think 4th round would be the highest I'd go. I'd much prefer 5th. We'll see how it ends up. But let's pivot into Coby White now, who also was outstanding down the stretch last year. In his final 25 games, he was a 3rd rounder. Now, a couple things happened during this stretch that, and Josh Giddey is guilty of this as well. A couple things were different for these guys. Giddey taking whatever it was, 6 free throws a game and shooting 50% instead of a career 46.5. Are these things that stick? A steal rate for Giddey that went through the roof last year. I don't know that that necessarily sticks either. The rebounding went way up. Not that far up, I guess. Rebounding stayed somewhat consistent. The assists went up a lot. We're still talking about Josh Giddey. Coby White, for Coby, it was more of a shooting bump. And, if we dig into the numbers a little bit more, and it's hard because you want to look at mostly just the second half because that's when things really picked up for him. But even just at a glance, the free throw number, which has always been pretty good for White, was over 90 for the second time in his career after 86, 87, and 84 the previous 3 seasons. So that was, again, is it sustainably high? It's kind of hard to say. What about 2-point shooting? This was, by all accounts, his finest 2-point shooting year. There was one season where he got pretty close to this mark, but it was on way lower usage. He was coming off the bench. And he wasn't playing all that much. It was like 3 seasons back. This year, on pretty damn high volume, he shot almost 55% on his 2s. And so his effective field goal percent was easily the best it's ever been. And by the way, that's for the entire season. If you're just looking down the stretch, it was crazy high on Coby White. And it feels kind of hard to say, oh, yeah, that's something that's definitely going to stick. Because White had never shot better than what he did this season, which was 45.3% from the field. His final 25 games, as we just talked about, were crazy good. He averaged 24.5 points, 4.5 boards, 4.5 assists, a steal, a little under 3 threes a game. This is all stuff that you're like, okay, like I'm on board. Those things feel right. But he did it on 49.5% from the field and 91% on almost 6 free throws per game. Some of that you can attribute to the post-Zach LaVine bump. He got about 2 shots more per game after LaVine got traded. Josh Giddey got the bigger chunk of the Zach LaVine usage, but Coby White got plenty. He got at least enough of his own. But that big field goal percent spike is what moved him. Because again, the peripheral stats didn't change that much. He was averaging like 18 points a game before LaVine left, and it went up to 24 with only, 2 more shots. That's like saying he made both of his additional shots, which I guess he kind of did, or almost 3. Going up 6-ish points on 2 more shots per game. Most of his value bump came in the efficiency spike, which kind of makes no sense because he was doing more. He was just making everything. Shot selection probably got a little bit better, better looks, or just like more at the rim. He was definitely attacking the rim more. But is that something that you can keep up for an entire season? So where with Giddey, I'm not. I think Josh Giddey is going to do a lot. I think Coby White looking more at sort of like a hybrid, which I guess would be his full season numbers, but full season numbers plus a little more usage without the massive efficiency spike, if that makes sense, which is more like top 50 range. Oddly, it is strikingly similar to the numbers that LaVine put up before he got traded. How do we find this? Let's find Zach LaVine stats. All right, Zach LaVine stats. LaVine with the Bulls was 24 points, 4.8 boards, 4.5 assists, just under a steal on 51 something splits. I don't have the free throw number in front of me. Where are you, free throw number? LaVine was 87. No, he was at 80 at the free throw line with Chicago. And so then you get, now that 51% shooting, I don't think that Coby White can get to that marker. But if you look at some of the other Zach LaVine shooting years, he was more like between 45 and 48. It kind of feels like that's what Coby White's going to be, which put LaVine in that 60 range those years. So Coby White, let's call it 45.5%, 46% shooting on the increased usage. It'll depend a little bit on whether his free throw is like 88% or 91, but that probably puts him somewhere between rank 40 and rank 70, which makes him still, I think, a very safe mid-rounder, but he's probably also not going to be a third rounder like he was down the stretch when literally every shot he took was going in. I mean, he shot 51% his final 15 games. Nothing else really changed all that much. He just made every damn shot. If you crank that back down to 46 instead of 51, he falls off a couple of rounds. And so Coby White to me is, like a late 5th, 6th kind of guy. And he might go a little earlier than that because he scores a lot. But if you're trying to debate between Coby White and Josh Giddey, I think I'd go the Giddey route. I do think both of them make a lot of sense as solid fantasy plays. I just got to see how much we got to spend to get them. All right, let's get into the guys that are a little bit less locked into value. And in what order we're going to do these guys is anybody's guess. Let's start with Buzelis, who profiles as one of fantasy basketball's sleeper darling candidates this year. And I'll admit, I'm like kind of semi on board with the concept. He was another guy who looked pretty good down the stretch. Final 15 games, Buzelis averaged 14 and 5 with 2.1 combined defensive stats, 0.8 steals, 1.3 blocks, 2.3 threes on 51-76 splits. That put him as kind of like a top 75 range sort of player, and that was cool. The one thing that I am a little bit nervous about is the field goal percent. Is that something that we think is going to stick over an entire year? Was it Buzelis kind of finding himself? Or was it just an upward blip on a team that was sort of in run and gun mode and nobody's guarding each other? The final 10 to 15 games of the year, nobody plays any defense at all. His G League stats, and I get it. Like, it's 1 year, it's 26 G League games. He shot 45% from the field. Pretty good block rate. So it feels like that was at least somewhat translatable. Rebounding was fine. I don't think that's going to get too big on a team that has a center and then a rebounding guard like Josh Giddey, so I wouldn't expect a whole lot more there. And the free throw percent has never been all that great. So when you look at Buzelis and you're like, all right, he got 76% of the foul line down the stretch last year, that kind of felt like it was maybe about as good as it's going to get. I know he shot 82% for the season, but which Buzelis do we get? Okay, fine. Let's just say we can't predict free throw percent at all. Do we think he's a 50%er from the field? Or do we think he's mid-40s? I don't know. But as we talk through the concept of what is a sleeper or a flyer type, I've kind of taken to calling them flyers because I don't know that anybody's really a sleeper anymore. There's enough podcasts and articles and expertise around where we pretty much know everybody. It just has to do with where do you think you're going to take them. I do think that Buzelis profiles as kind of a first-tier flyer, which we talked about Asar Thompson on our Pistons show that aired over the weekend. He also, I think, is among the... I haven't put that many guys on these team-by-team breakdowns in the first tier of flyers. I think you kind of have to put Buzelis in there because there's enough of an unknown with him that things could kind of click. That doesn't mean they will. That's a really important thing to take away. These are still flyer types. But when you get into that like 115 range and you're debating against, let's say, I mean, we're going to talk about Ayo Dosunmu and we're going to talk about Trey Jones. We're going to talk about Kevin Huerter kind of quickly here in a minute on the show, which are probably guys that don't profile as upside plays. Although I do like Trey Jones's fantasy game, so maybe I shouldn't lump him in there. But like, how good could it possibly be for Kevin Huerter this year? Top 80? probably a best case scenario for Huerter. More likely on Kevin is if he's not getting a dozen shots, he falls outside the top 100. Huerter needs 12 shots to be a top 100 guy. And he got that down the stretch with this Bulls team last year. Admittedly, guys were sort of in and out of the lineup. Giddey missed 5 games down the stretch, and I think they rested Coby White for a couple. No, maybe not. Tre Jones missed a bunch of time down the stretch, so that opened up a whole host of extra playing time minutes. This is not my. I'm not here to tell you that I don't like Kevin Huerter, because I actually said that he belonged on rosters at the end of last year, and there's a chance that he might. But if you're debating between those two guys, who, by the way, over the final month in 9 category leagues had the exact same ranking, 67, 68, they were the same. But you got to look at the young guy where there's still a bit of an unknown, which is, okay, look, Buzelis played 27 minutes a game during that final month. What if we look at the final 3 weeks? That went up to 28 minutes for Buzelis. Final 2 minutes, still 28 minutes. What about the final 1 week? I haven't looked. I'm guessing it's still around 28. Went back down to 27. Over those games, when Buzelis was playing about the same number of minutes as Huerter, he had the better ranking by a couple of spots. The field goal percent was unseasonably high for both guys, actually, during that stretch. So I don't know that we should expect either one of them to do it. But what if Buzelis blocks 1.6 shots a game this year and gets a steal and plays 29 minutes a game? I don't know what's going to happen. I don't think it's going to happen. But what if he can give you 14 and 6 with 2.5 defensive stats on 50-70 splits? That's a top 75 guy. Those are the guys that you're looking for in that 115, 125 range. The first tier of flyers. Could I end up with someone who's a 6th rounder or better? And the answer on Buzelis is maybe. And the answer on Kevin Huerter is, probably not. Now, you might ask yourself, as we flip over to Kevin Huerter now, since I keep using him as the dog comparison, which isn't fair, because I actually think Kevin Huerter probably should get drafted this season, but later, because he's more of a guy that's like, okay, well, if he gets 11 shots, he'll be like a top 115 type 125 kind of guy. If he somehow manages to tumble his way into a dozen shots, then he's a top 100 play. There's an outside shot. There's like a 25 to 30% chance that Kevin Huerter can get near the top 100. Is that fun? No, it's not fun. But if that's your 11th round pick in a head-to-head league and you're like, I just need a guy that's going to like fill in and give me some threes and steals and stuff. Okay. Not really steals, I guess. But like, he's there. Now, I'm not excited about Huerter at all. I hope someone else takes him before it gets to me at like 135. The last 2 guys I want to talk about on today's podcast, who, by the way, again, we've talked through all these guys, and I must remind you that FanDuel has this team's season win total mark at 31.5. Again, way down from last year in a weak Eastern Conference. This feels weird to me. There's something I'm missing. And is the thing I'm missing that they're going to like unload all of these guys? Because we know Vooch is on the block, and Huerter, I'm sure, would be on the block as well. They don't feel like they need to build around these guys. But like, I think they want to keep White and Giddey. And I know they're trying to figure out numbers that make sense for all these dudes, but the team played well down the stretch in a whack conference. Anyway, let's talk about who's on your screen right now. Is it still Huerter? Let's talk about Ayo Dosunmu and Tre Jones. And I this one to me is going to come down a little bit to who gets the starting job, because Tre Jones I think he got extended, right? He got extended. So his contract runs for a few years. Dosunmu's does not. So if you're looking on the like who's likely to get the longer look, you'd probably have to assume the guy that the Bulls seem to be sort of into. I like them both. They both have relatively translatable fantasy games in that Dosunmu is a little more well-rounded than Tre Jones, who's a little bit more laser-focused on field goal percent, assists, and steals. He's your sort of out of position point guard stats, which I love. His fantasy game is super translatable because he's a high efficiency assists steals guy. He's not going to score. He's not going to rebound. He's not going to hit threes. But if you can be good at both percentages at the guard spot, that's a big lift. Because normally, if you're going to get guard stats, you expect you're getting the low field goal percent. If you're going to pass up on threes, you better have a good field goal percent, which he very much did. He shot 57% in Chicago. That's not going to last. He's more of a 49%er in his career. But if you're getting 49% out of a point guard who can give you 5 to 6 assists a game and over a steal, there is, and good free throw number, there is a value in that. So what do we do about these guys? The answer to that, I think, is this is why, at least for me, I prefer drafting late. The Trey Jones, Ayo Dosunmu thing is why I prefer drafting close to the start of the season. Ayo missed the end of last year. I don't know if we have his health right this second. If you guys are watching and you have a more recent update on Dosunmu, fine, hit me with it. He is, I don't know, from just like an overall intrigue standpoint, they're almost exactly the same. Holy crap, they're born 9 days apart? Man, they really are the same age. I thought there was a little bit of a gap between them. There's literally no gap. Paper thin. So if you're thinking like, oh, who's going to get better? I think there's more upside intrigue with Dosunmu because he can hit the three. I think he's a little bit less of a traditional point guard where Trey Jones is more of the like, I'm going to distribute. That's the way I'm built. And Dosunmu's like, look, at some point I'm going to want to go get my own shot. And I don't think you get that out of Trey. So what does that mean for this Bulls team? Well, a Josh Giddey, Coby White, Vooch, Buzelis, other four, it's going to come down most likely to who they have better chemistry with. And it kind of feels like the guy who's just going to give the ball to the other dudes and then make easy buckets when he has the chance, that's Trey Jones, probably fits a little bit better. Herter probably comes off the bench, right? Unless they go Herter. I mean, he's the other option there, and then both Trey Jones and Ayo Dosunmu come off the bench. So maybe that's the answer to all of our Chicago Bulls questions as I talk it through in real time. Perhaps, perchance, if we're going to put some words together, perhaps the answer is whoever of those three guys is the fifth starter is the guy that we consider drafting with our second or third tier of flyers. Because Trey Jones can put up fantasy value in 26, 27 minutes a game. Herter needs 30. Dosunmu probably needs 32. So from that standpoint, I'd love for the winner of the position battle to be Trey Jones. I'd love it because then you can draft and be like, yeah, I mean, if he's starting, he's probably going to get 25, 26 minutes, and that puts him in startable late point guard category. If it's not him, I would hope that it's Herter. And then it's like, look, Josh Giddey, Coby White, you guys are the primaries. You don't need another point guard on the floor with you. We're going to give you Herter, who's a floor spacer, bigger. He's 6'7". The other two guys are not that tall. Ayo listed at 6'5", Trey Jones 6'1". So do we go bigger and then just let Herter fire away? Because he's the guy who's going to chuck up threes. He took 7 a game in Chicago in 30 minutes a night. Maybe that's the answer. So let's wait. Let's see what the preseason brings. The more I talk it through here in real time, the more I think the answer is probably Kevin Herter and Josh Giddey, point forward. And then White and Herter are both sort of like your shooting guard, small forward types. And then Buzelis and Vucevic front court. But we'll see. We'll see. If Herter wins the starting job, I'd probably take him at, pick 130, 135. If Trey Jones gets the starting job, I might take him a tiny bit sooner than that. If Dosunmu gets the starting job, I'm not sure I'm drafting him, but if I do, it'll be after 140. And that is where we are on doubles. Thanks again to our buddies over at FanDuel for their continued partnership with us and with the Believe Network. Again, Dano leaning to the over on that 31.5 Bulls number into this year. Quick recap. Vooch, probably games cap format only. You're going to want to take him after 50, and head-to-head, I don't think I would do it. Josh Giddey, I'd love to look at him more in the 4th, 5th round, but we'll see how early he's going. Coby White, probably somewhere near in that like 55 to 75 range. Buzelis, first tier of flyers, whenever that happens to fall during drafts this year. And then we'll take a look at the other guys based on who gets the starting job. A tip of the cap to you all. Thanks for watching as per usual. Please hit subscribe on your way out. I forgot to say that at the beginning. Like the YouTube video. 5-star review if you're listening on Apple or Spotify. That actually does matter. I'm Dan for the Old Man Squad, and I'll see you guys again mañana. Adios.